Today's topic is House of Cards, or following suit. Before we get into this topic, let me ask you, how many of you have built a house of cards sometime in your life? Great show of hands. Look at that. Okay, keep your hands up for a minute. How many of them are still standing? Not one. Imagine that. If you've ever built a house of cards from a standard deck of playing cards, you know that it takes considerable skill and a steady hand to create a structure of any significant height. And even with all that skill and steadiness, if you happen to have a breeze come through the room, or the table shakes, or a wandering brother or sister, it's not going to last very long, is it? One method I used to try to use to prevent total destruction of my card towers was to have a strong and wide foundation. So at least something could be salvaged if it all came tumbling down. Sometimes I managed to save something, a story or two, but it didn't always work. Having a solid foundation is important, right, for everything. Let's look at some examples. To understand physics or chemistry, you need a solid foundation in science and math. And even in science and math, you need to understand the concepts, the basics of math. You have to know that 3 plus 3 is not the same as 3 times 3, and be able to accept that it's a different answer. To build a house, you have to make sure that the in-ground foundation and the structure and the frame and the roof are all solid and in alignment and secure before you can add anything on and expect it to still stand. To plant a garden or lay down sod, sometimes it's necessary to till the soil and pull out the rocks and the sticks and amend the soil, add maybe more dirt or manure or mulch, something, before you can even start to plant the seeds and the trees and the flowers. To have a lasting and meaningful relationship. Generally, people will date for a while, won't they? They'll discuss their different likes and dislikes. They'll see how compatible they are or not before they take it to the next level of commitment or marriage. What are some others? Help me out here. What are some examples that require a solid foundation? Shout it out.
Trains.
Horses, okay.
Writing,
yes. How about music? Music requires a solid foundation. What about spirituality? Spirituality requires a real and firm foundation, doesn't it? I think most of you would agree with me that it would be a difficult and sad life to face this world without some understanding or foundation about God, beliefs, principles, values, virtues, and so on. And how do we get that foundation? Our spiritual awareness and beliefs. We read, we study, we take classes or go to workshops, we come to church. We have heartfelt discussions with others, people of like mind, or maybe not like mind, that challenge our beliefs, to notice how firm we are in what we think we believe. We test the universal principles time and time and time again to see if they still work. The principles, the foundation of creation, of God, the principles never change. We do. Our beliefs change and grow. So we test them some more. Until finally our beliefs, our faith is so solid, so unwavering that we have the faith of God, as Ernest Holmes directed us to do. We know that we know that we know that nothing can shake us off our foundation of belief and trust in the divine nature of God, of universal principles of life itself. Such is our topic today, as we bring to mind the importance of focusing on those beliefs that provide the foundation for our lives. As below, so above. What we think and plan on the inside has a way of manifesting in the world on the outside. This is a universal law, a principle that does not play favorites and upon which we can rely when creating our lives. What you put forth into creation through your thoughts, your feelings, your behaviors must manifest in your life, in your world, in some way. It's a law. And when you create a life with that knowledge and focus as its spiritual foundation, what you do will be lasting. It will endure as long as you intend and choose it to be so. It can stand the test of time and all the world's challenges that come before you. There's a story about a merchant, a wealthy man, who was well liked in his town. People considered him to be fair, likable, generous. He traveled the seas a great deal of the time. And when he was away, there were just a few people in town that he could rely on to help take care of his estate and the things that needed to be done while he was away. One of these individuals that helped him was a man who was a carpenter by trade. The merchant often needed him to make repairs around his mansion and estate, buildings for his livestock and his horses, expand his house with a room here or a wing over there. The carpenter was conscientious, reliable, and always charged a fair price for his work. After doing so much work for the merchant over the years, the carpenter was like a brother to this wealthy man, someone he trusted. One day the merchant called the carpenter to his mansion for a special meeting. He had a big project he wanted to discuss with him. The merchant laid out for the carpenter what the plan was, what the ideas were. He was going on a long journey and would be away from his estate for about 9 months. During that time, he wanted the carpenter to build a grand house on another plot of land he owned, but was also closer to town. He showed the plans to the carpenter, gave him several bags of gold coins to cover the costs of the materials, to hire additional laborers, and enough to pay the carpenter for his time and talent to oversee this big project so that it would be done by the time the merchant got back. He had 9 months. The merchant made it clear to the carpenter that this was to be a house of quality and fine workmanship, a place where anyone would be proud to call home. It was to be detailed with fine wood for the doors and the mantels, marble floors, lovely accents, many windows, strong, secure hardware on the doors and windows. The carpenter was honored and grateful for the opportunity to take on such a large project like this, and he agreed to the challenge. The merchant left on his journey that week, and the carpenter started it the very same day. He ordered all the specific materials the merchant mentioned: the wood for the doors and the mantels, the marble, the windows, the hardware. While he was doing that, he also had another idea. It was about those parts of the house that no one would see. And it would allow him to keep a larger portion of the gold coins for himself and his family. Starting with the foundation, he began using cheaper materials, cutting corners. The carpenter made sure the house was fairly solid, that it would stand and not fall down around the merchant's ears anytime soon, but the workmanship was not his best. He was confident that the house would pass inspections, barely, but he also knew in his heart that it wasn't his highest achievement. Still, he forged on ahead with the project and completed it just a few days before the merchant arrived back into town. The carpenter was invited the very next day to tour the completed home with the merchant. The carpenter pointed out the details that the merchant had specifically asked for, and it all appeared to be quite nice. Whatever shoddy workmanship had been done was hidden in the foundation and behind the walls and out of sight. The merchant had no clue that it had not cost nearly as much as he had allotted for in the budget, but he trusted the carpenter and was pleased with the results he could see. As the tour of the new home was completed, the merchant told the carpenter that he had a surprise for him. The merchant explained that while the new home was lovely and it appeared to be fine work, he really did love his old mansion and estate very much, and that he'd lived in it all these years and he really didn't want to move out of that. And in fact, it never was his intention to move into this new house. So he pulled the keys from his pocket and handed them to the carpenter. "This house," he said, "is for you and your family. After all these years of dedicated and quality service to me, I wanted to give you something in return. This home is yours." Just like the carpenter, we get back from life, from our efforts, from our beliefs, what we put into it. Our life follows suit to our beliefs and behaviors and thoughts. A house of cards is not designed to stand up to strong winds or irritating siblings. So too, when you do something with half interest or little enthusiasm, it creates something less than stellar, less than your best. Now, since we already have been talking about Alice in Wonderland this month, I'm going to tie that back into that story. She was able to triumph over all those card soldiers and the Queen of Hearts because they could not withstand her desire, her intention and belief that she would return home. They were made of cards, something thin and flimsy and easily shoved aside, able to be flattened with the littlest of force and run over, and Alice did that quite well. Once she realized how powerful she was, once she recognized that her conviction and her desire had power, she moved forward with energy and authority. She tested her belief, her inner knowing, to challenge the courtroom of those trying to judge her. And this little girl grew, didn't she? First in size due to the magic mushroom, then in confidence and trust due to her inner magic. That's all of us. At some time or another, depending on the situation, our inner magic, our faith and trust in a divine wisdom brings forth an expression of strength that we didn't realize was there until it's there. For example, maybe it takes getting an advanced degree in some specific expertise of learning before we are confident enough to claim the wisdom we've already learned and had from years of experience. For me, it was getting a bachelor's degree in communication before I felt confident enough to speak up in public. That degree validated all the years of practical experience I already had in marketing and public relations. The work experiences were my foundation that made it easier to do the curriculum and whiz through most of the classes. The rest of them I relied on my husband to help me through. The degree was the magic mushroom that allowed me to grow to a greater expression of me, of what was already within me. All of you have worked and studied and persevered in some capacity, in some area of expertise, to build professional careers, maybe get an advanced degree. You probably didn't start out at the top of the management chain, did you? Unless, of course, it was your own company. But even then, you serve your customers. And you must answer to them and to continue to expand your knowledge and skills, or you won't be in business for very long. And I would venture to guess that while such a foundation of learning and education is what got you to where you are today, it's not the end of the journey. If you want to keep your job or your customers, you must keep learning, building a stronger foundation of expertise upon which you can build the next level, your future. It's a natural progression of work life until you decide to stop, either to change careers or companies or retire. And then a new journey begins. A new foundation is developed. New experiences are shared. New ways of doing or seeing things are practiced. Behind all of these efforts is some type of belief in yourself and what you are doing. Some type of inner drive or knowing that you are on the right path. I call it a spiritual connection. Because for me, I don't make any decisions anymore without going within, checking in with my God source, that divine intelligence that knows it all. I'll give my human thinking room to weigh the pros and cons, make the list, review the logic, but ultimately I make my decision based on what my God self is telling me is for my highest and best good. When you first start doing this practice, trusting your God source with absolute conviction, it can be difficult and confusing to your human thinking, your ego self, naggy. That human part of you wants reassurance and guarantees that the decision you're about to make will create the exact future you have in your mind. How limiting is that? There's no room in that scenario for God to create something better than what you can think of. And it doesn't matter what it refers to. Your job, your garden, your relationships. Have an idea in mind about the direction you're going. Absolutely. And start moving in that direction, yes. And leave room for spirit to show up in ways that you never thought about. I've recited this next quote from Ernest Holmes in the past, and I'm pretty sure I'll repeat it again in the future sometime. It's from the Science Mind textbook, page 423, for you students. In conclusion, what the world needs is spiritual conviction, followed by spiritual experience. And here's my favorite part. I would rather see a student of this science prove its principle than have him repeat all the words of wisdom that have ever been uttered. It is far easier to teach the truth than it is to practice it. The same thing happened with Alice. She had been practicing for her journey home during the entire adventure in the Kingdom of Hearts. She didn't know that's what she was doing. How many of us know that certain little things we learn or do along the way will be of major importance at some point later in our lives? That one little decision, if we judge it good or bad, now will have a major impact later on. Hindsight's 20/20. We know we've seen those moments of clarity. Alice ran from that courtroom without knowing where home was, without knowing which path to take in that moment. She'd already asked everyone along the way for help, and no one had been able to guide her home. But when she started running from that flimsy kingdom of cards, not only did the cards start falling down behind her, but the path started forming in front of her. All of a sudden, through her intense desire to go home, and her faith in the actions she was taking in that direction, she was guided back to her starting point. She got home and woke up to who she really was. I believe that we do all wake up to our spiritual and powerful nature at some point in our lives. Some sooner than later, but it happens nevertheless. And yes, as Holmes pointed out, it is much easier to teach these principles and lessons than to put them into practice, that I know. But putting them into practice is the only way they become part of our knowingness, part of our DNA, our spiritual awareness, and thus become part of our internal experience, so they can become part of the outer and material world of reality. What I have learned so far, and what I invite and encourage you to consider and do, is very simple. 3 steps. First, spend some time each day with God. Whether it's through reading uplifting books or articles, meditating, walking in nature, coming to church, having private prayers with a practitioner, sharing time with animals, playing with your children. Just spend time each day looking out through the eyes of God. looking out through the eyes of God. Notice what you see and feel, and how you are in the world in those moments. You may find, as I have discovered, that I prefer to be in that God space, that divine space, that bliss space, more of the time than anywhere else in the world. Sometimes it's hard to come back to the reality of life. Then it becomes a challenge for us to be that way in all situations. All of life can be bliss. Which brings us to the second awareness. Through the practice of God connection with the divine, you will build a spiritual base that is so solid, so unwavering, that no earthly circumstance can shake you from the foundation of your beliefs. You will find yourself being pulled deeper into spiritual practice, such that God starts showing up in all areas of your life as you. And you will notice the strength of your God partnership and the spiritual foundation as it grows and becomes more of your life than it was before. You become a presence of God, of good, of love, and there's no turning back. A friend of mine once told me, once you become aware, you can never be unaware. And finally, number 3, base your decisions in divine love and make them first for the highest good of yourself and second for those around you. Feed your soul. Breathe in the life-affirming oxygen of trust and awareness that can only be obtained through a God connection, a spiritual foundation. Yes, do the pros and cons, create the list. Allow that part of your thinking mind to offer its input. Be responsible, for there are consequences. We call them effects for all our decisions and actions. And listen to the still small voice within. At the end of the day, no matter how long those lists are, you know you're going to follow your gut and your intuitive self anyway. You can use these 3 simple and challenging steps for every situation for the rest of your life. You'll never run out of things to work on. Your life will unfold before you. Absolute clarity and perfection for your highest expression. And it will continue to evolve and grow and expand in limited and powerful ways. It will be built on a solid foundation of spiritual guidance and connection. And everything that follows must follow suit.